We are the University of Bedfordshire, where groundbreakers take risks, where future leaders make their mark, where high flyers soar. Get the support and opportunities to achieve more, become more, defy expectations. Find out how a degree at Bedfordshire can change your life. Book now for our open day on November 21st at beds.ac.uk/defy.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK radio network. I'm your host Paul Rook, and as always we're joined by the stupendous Kerry Greenaway and Richard Clements. Hello guys.
Hello.
I nearly forgot that PA UK bit.
Yeah, what a game.
Yeah, again.
And you being a manager of the station, tut,
I know.
Mr. Rook.
Yeah. That's because I'm not used to it. I'm too used to the other one we used to do.
Oh, God, yeah.
We are the University of Bedfordshire, where groundbreakers take risks, where future leaders make their mark, where high flyers soar. Get the support and opportunities to achieve more, become more, defy expectations. Find out how a degree at Bedfordshire can change your life. Book now for our open day on November 21st at beds.ac.uk/defy.
Let's not get that confused.
No, absolutely not. No.
That was nearly a year ago now.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
think about it, must have been, yeah. How time has moved on.
How time flies.
Yeah.
How time flies.
So what have you been up to this week? Anything good?
Well, I'm working on my Christmas range for Spirit and Soul Island, so I've been knee deep in suppliers this week, which is always fun. I do like buying crystals.
Really? I've never noticed about
Honestly,
that.
I get into such a little spending frenzy when I'm doing crystal work. It's crazy. My supplier must crack up. He must love it when I come on to Skype. He's like, oh.
I bet he's rubbing his hands together as we speak.
Probably. My lovely friend, how is you? I'm like, I'm great, thanks. What you got to show me this week? And he's like, oh, lots of lovelies. Does talk like that. I'm not taking the mickey. He does actually talk like that. And then there's lots of oohs and ahs and oohs that goes on. It's terrible. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Bless
well,
you.
I've been out today. I went into town and because I had a book token. You see, so I thought, it's a long time since I've had one of those. So yes, I went into Waterstones and purchased a book. Yeah, called Cursed Britain.
Ooh.
Yeah, the trials and tribulations inside my house, I think it's about. I'm not too sure. But no, it's a history of witchcraft and black magic in modern times.
Fabulous.
I thought you could say witchcraft and wizardry then.
So yeah, not too sure what it's about. I've had a brief little flick through it, but I shall be sitting down and going through that. That's my sort of early winter reading. Something nice and light, I thought.
Why not? Yeah.
It can't get any worse.
It's like you ain't got enough books, Rich.
Well, yeah, that's enough one for the pile.
Another one for my bookcase later on in life, is what I'm thinking.
Absolutely.
We'll have to wait and see.
Read it and then pass it along, you know it.
Yeah, yes.
Might take me 6 years to read it, but I'll get there.
Yeah, I'll take it to the Catsby Island Book Depository.
Well, at least you know I don't get rid of them.
No, that's true. At least I know they're safe.
You mean the Catsby Island Book Black Hole?
Yeah.
Once it goes there, you'll never see it ever again.
To be fair, I've still got a book that I borrowed from Penny ages ago. I can't even tell you. It must be like a year and a half ago.
Oh,
I've still got it. The laugh of it is, though, nobody can worry, because if you lend me a book, you might not see it for years, but I will still have it. I won't get rid of it. So all you got to do is, like, phone me or ask me, you know, if you want it back. But if not, then it'll sit on my bookshelf.
Oh, yeah.
Bless her. She's probably, like grinding her teeth at me. But, yeah, I'm notorious for that.
Oh, well.
Anyway.
Did you have a great Halloween, though?
Yes.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yes, I did. Thanks.
Pretty quiet. But,
awesome.
Yeah, getting there.
Loving Bly Manor. Still ploughing my way through that.
Excellent.
I've yet to watch that, but I've been told to watch it. I mean, before you came on, Paul, me and Kerry were chatting, and she refused to tell me any spoilers. She says, I've got to watch it. So not only have I got a book to read, I've got a TV series to watch as well.
Well,
that's it. Absolutely.
I think we should do a show on that. I was just saying to Richard before we came on air. So I think we should do a show on it to explain some of the concepts that are being raised in it. For the people that don't understand what's going on in some of the episodes.
That would be actually quite good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought that would be
I'd have
right
to go
up.
and watch it again.
Exactly.
I thought that would be right up your street, Paul. Well, at least it beats Doctor Who, Kerry.
It certainly does. Anyway, we are coming up to another big occasion, aren't we, my beautiful boys?
Yes, we are. It's just one thing after another.
It's just occasion after occasion in the UK. And this is a predominantly UK occasion, which is Bonfire Night. We have fireworks and bonfires and frivolities and wine and lots of wine and stuff. But so we thought we'd talk about this because it is it is UK, a UK festival, and the people around the world that love to listen to us may not know about this. So we're going to delve back into history because there's a background to this that we need to explain because it's one of those, isn't it? Because we're at a time when our beloved Queen Elizabeth I, she was dying, and she was the Virgin Queen, so she didn't have an heir.
Oh, that's right, yeah. So there was a lot of anticipation, though, because during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, she was actually excommunicated by the Pope, which sort of like freed the Catholic subjects of this country actually not to have loyalty to her. So during most of her reign was taken up with trying to foil sort of Catholic plots against her because the Catholics in the country obviously wanted the country to go back to Catholicism, which was not the religion of the UK at the time because we had all but reverted to Protestantism. I'm sounding like you now, Kerry, aren't I?
I
they basically will become Protestants.
Yeah, Protestants. So, but against this background, there was sort of like a lot of rumblings. There was a lot of plots involving sort of perhaps killing the Queen or kidnapping her, and sort of so the Catholics could actually force some sort of ask for better treatment. But in retaliation, Queen Elizabeth and her sort of like court put very strict restrictions on the Catholic faith. They had to attend Anglican churches. I mean, they weren't allowed to celebrate Mass. So the Catholic religion here in the UK was actually pushed underground. So there was always a simmering sort of resentment and undertone from Catholics in this country. But actually, after the death of Queen Elizabeth, there looked like to be a bit of hope because the direct heir was James VI of Scotland, who was the son of Mary Queen of Scots. And so it was thought that a lot of Catholics would be... There was a lot of like rumblings that he'll be quite favourable to Catholics. So when they brought him to England, he did actually start to ease some of the restrictions that were actually placed on Catholics here in England. Like he sort of stopped fining them for not attending churches, etc. And there was a slight sort of movement that restrictions were easing. But
1 second, let's just talk about the succession because we've got Queen Elizabeth, no children.
Yep.
If a king or queen dies, their eldest son would then inherit the throne. However, Queen Elizabeth didn't have any heirs because obviously she didn't have children, so she had to nominate an heir. Mm-hmm. So she really didn't want to nominate James VI, but she didn't really have any choice because looking at the way the succession goes, that's who would have been next in line when you look at the family trees and stuff like that.
Mary, Queen of Scots, was Elizabeth's half-sister.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So,
so that's how come James VI of Scotland ended up becoming James I of England.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that's just to explain the succession to people that might not understand how succession works outside the UK.
It's so complicated.
It gets complicated everywhere. Particularly back in these days.
and around these sort of things, But say like James, he actually had a Catholic wife, Queen Anne of Denmark. So again, another good sign. And so when he became King of England, he actually started to put a few prominent sort of Catholic earls sort of in prominent positions. The Earl of Northumberland was one of them, and so things were starting to move along, but like all things in this period, things weren't easy. There was a bit of a backlash in court and Parliament, and James basically tried, but he didn't try really hard enough. He sort of backed down, and sort of very early in his reign, he decided to renege on a lot of the stuff he'd promised.
So in the country, you've got two massive religious sets of people. You've got the Protestants, which is like the Church of England.
Yes.
Who basically, that's where King Henry VIII set up. You've got, supporters of that. And then you've got original religion of Catholicism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And depending on the king or queen's affiliation to which religion, dictated which religion was dominant in the country. Now, bearing in mind, Queen Elizabeth I was Protestant, and, the Protestants had a lovely time under Queen Elizabeth I. But the Catholics, very suppressed religious base. It's the same old story, though, isn't it, everybody? It's not being able to get a balance. So, like, nowadays, we're very blessed because we can pretty much worship whatever we want, however we want. Because we have, Sikhs and Muslims and Jews and Protestants and Catholics. We have a whole mixed bag these days. So it's hard to sort of understand the divide and the division that this caused. I suppose a modern example is the Black Lives Matter movement, isn't it? It's caused a big division between white and black people because of the way it's gone. And this is sort of how it would be back in Tudor period, you know what I mean? Oh, not Tudor, post-Elizabethan. James.
Stuart,
that's it, the Stuart period. Where you've got like these factions, these two massive religious factions vying for power and prominency within the ruling cultural set.
Well, that's right, because it wasn't illegal to be a Catholic. You could be a Catholic, but it was hoped that you kept your faith to yourself. And but in this period, Tudor into the Stuart period, I mean, religion and politics was so intertwined. They were one of the same. I mean, if you were head of the church, you were the head of the, because the monarch was the head of the church as well, and they couldn't be seen to be taking any influence from another religious denomination, which Catholicism was. But there were, but Catholicism had only really sort of ended during the time of Henry VIII, when he sort of like broke away from the Catholic Church. So we're still in a relatively an early period of this sort of transition, and it wasn't until the end of the 17th century. I know we're talking about the start of it, but it wasn't until the end of the 17th century when sort of Parliament came in and really did put down the law on succession. Even today, I mean, a Catholic can't be King of England.
It just caused too many. It just caused too many issues, didn't it?
Too many issues, and this dogged the whole of the Stuart dynasty, which was basically the whole of the 17th century, because they had this very uneasy. They often flirted with Catholicism. They would have Catholic wives, and this just caused a lot of trouble.
Mm. And this is the melting pot of emotion that that we're in. We're right in the beginning of this situation, aren't we? It's just a bit of a mess, really, and it swung around the power.
So is this sort of then the settings for Oliver Cromwell and the English Civil War?
That comes later, but
this is pretty much where it's sort of.
This would be sort of, yes, that there was a religious element to the English Civil Wars, and it is a bit more complex than that, but there was a religious element, and it certainly was used, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And also, don't forget, Protestants, their head of church is the King or Queen of England, whereas for Catholics, it's going to be the Pope. It's
going to be the Pope, so there's a torn loyalty there as well.
And no king or queen, because they believe they were anointed to be king or queen by God, would accept the authority of the Pope, which was the main problem with old King Henry VIII, quite frankly, which caused this problem in the first place, everybody. It gets very complicated, our English history at times.
Don't you just love religion?
Oh, you love it, right? So anyway, we get to this melting pot where James is trying to balance between... He's trying to... the best of both worlds. He's trying to say, basically... practice what you like, just don't cause me any hassle. I'm not prepared to be as strict about Catholicism as, other kings or queens, but don't give me no trouble. But there was a problem because he discovered two small little ones, Catholic plots in the July of 1603. And unfortunately, you're going to carry on plotting against me. I'm going to come down hard on you. That's kind of how it goes, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of Catholics at the time were horrified when this actually happened as well. They were saying, I suppose you get militants even back then. Sort of like you always have your more extreme sort of branches, and a couple of these plots were uncovered, and the king and that forced the king's hand. He said, "Right, you go back to the way it was. I can't trust you."
Isn't that almost mimicking what's happening today with the Muslims in particular? In the UK, because some of the terrorist acts that have happened in the world, they claim to do it on behalf of the Muslims.
Yeah.
But then there's other Muslims out there that will turn around and say, well, actually, they're not acting for me. I'm a Muslim, and it's a peaceful religion.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what this is going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the majority of the Muslim people who are living in the West and trucking along quite nicely, they're like, don't look at us. It's got nothing to do with us. That is not us. Do you know what I mean? Whereas you've got these factions that will not be happy and will do what they can to rock the boat or try and take power. And it's all politics. It is very political, a lot of it. And as I say, at this time, the political wrangling was, as Richard has already said, is so intertwined with religion. We haven't got that separation from politics and religion as being two completely separate entities.
We're still a long way off from a secular society, a secular country here. A long way off.
Yeah. So this is you're not wrong in thinking it's very similar to that situation. So you've got factions within the Catholics causing trouble, and the rest of the Catholics are going, well, hold on a minute, we were getting a lot, restrictions have been lifted, we were able to sort of start relaxing a little bit, we're starting to get a little bit of foot in power, slowly, steadily, catchy monkey kind of thing, whereas other people are like, no, we want power, we want it now, kind of thing. And this is the problem. And so you've got poor old James right in the middle of this going, I sympathise towards the Catholics, do you know what I mean? I'm fine with the Protestants. I'm right in the middle here, and then
I'm trying to keep the wife happy.
That's always difficult at the best of times. Without religion in the mix, But then these two Catholic plots come up, and he's like, "I've got no choice, mate. You forced my hand." And then there was a big conference. There's a Hampton Court conference was in January of 1604, and he basically said, nah, I'm not going to take this from the Catholics in order to keep the Puritans, the Protestants and that side of it happy. And that really, really upset the Catholics. That really did cause a death blow almost to the Catholics. Their hope was sort of like devastated at that point, because it just...
And this happened quite swiftly within days of this conference. Sort of like the priests and Jesuits had been expelled, and the fines had been reintroduced for not attending Anglican church and everything. I mean, it was pretty swift. Which they didn't hang about in those days. No,
that's one thing you will notice when you look at this period, is when like the king or queen decreed something, it happened very quickly. So like when, if you look at how quickly things happened after King Henry VIII decided to split from the Pope, from Catholicism, and set up his own church, that happened in a relatively short couple of years, a period of time. It weren't like, I think I might... You know what I mean? Yeah. It was like, no, that's what's happening. And then he sent his troops out and it happened.
And anyone that did get in the way, I think, was it Cromwell sort of tried to, he just had, just trump up charges against them and have them conveniently beheaded.
So now we've got a time where there was hope and people were starting to be able to get more, do things and not get the fines and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden it's back imposed on you. Yeah. It's a bit like lockdown. When you think about it.
The only thing with lockdown is that the Prime Minister and the President have said, right, I've had enough, this is what we've got to do. And then the others some other people are going, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, more or less.
But they don't wield the power in the way they used to back in these days. Definitely. Because they could have done a lot more. They could have done a lot worse on the streets. They could have put martial law in, and there's all sorts of things they could have done that they didn't. Whereas back then they would have done it and not thought twice about it.
Well, yeah, that's it. And it would have been basically anyone that went against the Prime Minister or the King or Queen at the time would be done for treason.
Well, yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly where we're at.
Bring that back.
So we've got the King basically saying now, well, sorry, Catholics, you've buggered yourselves up now, because I'm not prepared to make any concession, and you are going to have to go back under the restrictions because, well, you're plotting against me all the time and you're causing right trouble, and it's causing lots of issues that I don't want. So this is now where we're at, and the Catholics are not happy. So you'll get more problems because of this. So bring in Robert Catsby.
Yeah, Mr. Catsby.
He was a very devout Catholic.
Yeah.
Now, he has been, over his time of life, quite persecuted. His family have been quite persecuted for being Catholics. So they've gone through, the whole family have gone through this time of constant persecution for his faith. I mean, his father had been imprisoned for harbouring a priest. He'd had to leave university himself without a degree because he wouldn't take the Protestant oath of supremacy. And so he's feeling not very happy at all.
No.
He's feeling very suppressed, is old Robert. But he's the kind of person that, like some people you meet that are very charismatic.
Oh, yes. I've sort of read a bit about Mr. Catsby. You would have liked him, Kerry. I think all the girls did.
I reckon he was a narcissist. I love a narcissist.
Oh, no, he is supposed to be very dashing.
Ooh, a dashing narcissist. My kind of guy.
He had his own Ferrari and everything.
Woohoo! Or was it a Porsche in the garage? Sorry.
Let's not go there.
Let's not talk about that. No, he had a very, very magnetic personality. So when he spoke, people listened. You get these people, Charles Manson goes, whenever we talk about people like this, I see the worst in people. I never see the good ones. I always see the bad ones. Isn't that bad of me?
Oh, dear.
Anyway, so basically he gets all his mates together and says, oh, yeah, this this is awful for us Catholics. We need to do something about this, and jolly hockey sticks. And
because he has a meeting, and I find it funny. He sort of gets together a couple of the original plotters first, but they have a meeting in a pub on the Strand called the Duck and Drake.
As you do.
As you do. Now, I have a theory about this.
What's that, the Duck or the Drake?
No, the fact that they're in a pub, he's out with his mates, basically. Because they're all of these people are his friends to start with. So you've got Thomas Wintour, Jack Wright, Thomas Percy, and himself. So you've got the lads' night out, right? In the pub. Wow. Talking over, putting the world to rights.
Yeah.
And as the night's gone on, it's deteriorated into this plot. This is how I see this starting. I'm sorry, I don't know I don't think it was anything more than a lads' night out. I know what we should do kind of moment.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry.
I can
think that's what it is.
What you're getting at, yeah, but these would have been the meeting places at the time, and you could be quite indiscreet in a crowded sort of tavern at the time, sort of. Pubs and coffee shops were quite a lot of spies would have been deployed to these sorts of places, and James would have inherited quite a sophisticated spy network from Elizabeth I. So yeah, but
which even with that understanding, again, how stupid then to do it in a pub in the middle of London.
Well, yeah, it does.
Talking about blowing up Parliament, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah. But there was a fifth person present as well, wasn't there?
There certainly was, Paul.
Yeah.
Apparently there was. There was lots of them around at the time.
Who was the fifth one?
What one are we talking about? You're talking about the
famous one. We're talking about the famous one.
Yeah, the one everyone knows.
Yeah, Guy Fawkes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good old Guy Fawkes.
Good old infamous Guy Fawkes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we burn him every year on the top of the fire.
Poor old Guy Fawkes. Anyway, he was originally from York, and he'd actually been recruited in Flanders, where he'd been serving in the Spanish army. And they got into this plan to blow up Parliament. But they actually went ahead with it. It weren't just like all drunken talk. They actually went as far as going ahead with their plan. This is how strongly they felt about it. They're going to blow up Parliament. And we've got, basically, a group of mates, 5 mates, to start with, that are doing this.
I reckon it probably started, like, when Thomas Becket was murdered, the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yeah.
It was just some flippant remark, and then 2 soldiers overheard and went off and killed him. I think it was something like that, It was a flippant remark about blowing up Parliament, and one of his mates was like, actually, that's not a bad idea, I'll do that.
This is, to be fair, this is kind of how I see this, but they've got money and they've got resources, this band of fret fellas, because they actually lease a small house at the heart of Westminster, and Guy Fawkes becomes its caretaker, but it doesn't go under Guy Fawkes, he actually goes under an alias of John Johnson.
Yeah, Mr. Johnson.
So John Johnson is Guy Fawkes. That's his alias.
Mm-hmm.
So they've gone that step further. They're actually getting to the point where they're like in the heart of Westminster. They rent out this house. Now, bearing in mind, most people rented houses, like the gentry would rent an apartment or a house or a manor house, and then they would go and live there for 6 months and then move on. You know what I mean? That was quite common. Back in the day.
People would have owned property and just rented it out, and sort of like London's very different back then to what it is now. You wouldn't be able to get, to rent a property within a mile of the Houses of Parliament now. But
there is a house a mile.
No, that's right. But back then, it was like that. There would have been, little sort of shops and sort of little houses and stuff, and people all lived on top of each other. So acquiring a property quite close to your intended target was relatively easy. And as you said, Kerry, Catsby and his original sort of 4 plotters, they were quite well connected, and they did have money. You know, they weren't poor, so you know they obviously thought they stood a chance.
I have a question.
What's that?
On this. Now, the Houses of Parliament that we know and love today in London, is that how it was in these days?
No, the Houses of Parliament we've got now were built in the 1850s, I think. The only bit surviving from the original Houses of Parliament is what's called Westminster Hall, and that's off to the left. No, it's off to the right, I believe, as you stand facing. Yeah, so that's the original. Yeah, it would have looked nothing like.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it just like a massive big hall?
It was basically a hall, yeah. And Westminster Hall is the is the only medieval part that's actually sort of left, and this is the part that Parliament would have sat in originally. So technically, yes, it still exists, but the Houses of Parliament you see now with Big Ben and stuff, that's built off to one side.
And wasn't it made of wood as well?
Well, it's a stone facade, but the interior, yeah, it would have been wood panelled and everything. Yeah.
So I just wanted to give people an idea that, because I would imagine that everyone's thinking the House of Parliament as they are today, and it wasn't as magnificent as that.
Just imagine an old community hall made of wood and just times it by 8. And
it was a big hall for its day, but it wasn't massive. It was just a hall. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not what you see today that they're looking to blow up. So and there's a lot of houses around that as well. So you have got this accessibility, and you also have things like cellars and stuff, which we don't really have these days either, really, do we?
Not really, no. Sort of, they would have been used for storage and stuff like that, yeah. Mm-hmm. And we have fridges now, so we don't need a cellar.
This is true. So it's a very different landscape that we're talking about in regards to this plot. And it's important to bear that in mind to get it into your heads of how they managed to do this in the first place. Because it's not like that now. You'd never get away with it now.
Oh, no.
You just wouldn't. Right, anyway, so Parliament was successfully postponed to the 5th of November in 1605. Now, the number of plotters increased to 10. So we've gone from the original 5. We then add Robert Keyes, Robert Wintour, John Grant and Kit Wright. These are all relatives. So again, they're keeping it very small, very close within the family and friends set, basically.
Yeah.
So they're all related by blood or marriage to the original 5.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of Catesby's servants, Thomas Bates, his loyalty was equally firm. So he's been a family servant for a long time. So they're all in this little plot. So we're not talking like hundreds of thousands of people. We're talking like literally a small band of people, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, they kept it pretty much to themselves. You know, they were relying on a lot that would hopefully happen after the event, which will come a bit later, which we'll get onto. But yeah. So
they then took out a lease on a ground floor cellar, which was close by the house that they had rented, where John Johnson, Guy Fawkes, was ensconced. So they've now got a cellar.
Yes, because from the house, I was reading another account, they did actually try and tunnel, because they thought they couldn't, that and the house was the closest they could get, but they knew it wasn't good enough. So they did originally try to tunnel, but they had a lot of problems tunnelling. But then, to their luck, this cellar, right under where everyone was going to be, became available.
Strike of luck. God is speaking to us. He's making our plot successful because he's given us access to this cellar.
Yeah.
Or did the authorities know?
Well, this is one of the sort of many sort of theories around it, but yeah.
Conspiracy 101.
But anyway, this cellar
was a sting operation.
Maybe it was, who knows, right? But this cellar is directly underneath the House of Lords, right? Yeah. In the following months, 36 barrels of gunpowder were moved in. 36 barrels. That's quite a lot.
That's quite a lot, and what you've got to remember here again, that was quite a feat, because gunpowder was very heavily monitored back in these days, because it was like any explosive, and to acquire 36, that would have taken a while to actually get and transport and sort of deposit under a cellar. I mean, so that was quite an operation.
The smuggler trade might have come in here.
Yeah, a lot of the gunpowder, yeah, I believe this is one of the reasons they had Guy Fawkes on board, because of his connections with the military on the continent. He basically sort of would know how to acquire this stuff and how to handle it.
By nefarious means, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm just seeing smugglers all over this. Anyway. Now, Fawkes is travelling backwards and forwards. Although he's, ensconced in his house in London, he's also going backwards and forwards to Flanders. But he was spotted by English spies whilst doing this. He is noted by the spies. I mean, I kind of have him down as one of the... See, my imagination with this whole plot runs riot. The whole thing makes me run riot. Because I have him acting like, in the old crappy spy movies where they're like cloak and daggery and they've got like a cloak over their eyes and they're like not suspicious at all. I've got him acting a bit like that to be, pinpointed by the English spies.
The classic image of Guy Fawkes with the sort of like the big felt hat, the cloak,
with the barrel on his arm.
Exactly.
Whistling as he's walking down the road.
Exactly. Nothing to see here, Gov. Nothing to see here.
That's it.
Of all the people that would stand out in a crowd, he probably would.
I don't think it was probably like that, but Anyway, he was. This got reported back to Robert Cecil. Now, Robert Cecil, Earl of Salisbury, was James's first minister, and he made the link between Fawkes and Catsby, or Catesby, or whatever you want to say his name. So they're starting to go, there's something rather strange going on here. Let's keep our beady little eyes on it.
Yep.
So they're now noted by the English spies. Now, am I right in thinking Robert Cecil was known as Elizabeth I's eyes?
Yes. It is the same Robert Cecil. So, as I sort of like alluded to earlier, he had his fingers in a lot of pies, and he knew quite early on, possibly even before Fawkes actually was noted going to and from the continent, that something was afoot.
Mm-hmm.
He would have known.
He set up the spy network in the UK. He was fundamental in doing that. And there's not a lot that got past old Robert Cecil.
He was a very clever man.
He was very observant, very clever, and very good at putting two and two together. So he's an incredible ally for the king.
Yes. And you did listen to him, Well, he was the first minister, literally, he was the prime minister, more or less, even though the post didn't exist. He was the king's principal minister.
Mm-hmm. So over the next 2 months, Catsby then goes recruiting, and he recruits Ambrose Rookwood, as well as Francis Tresham and Sir Everard Digby. Now, these are very wealthy men. They've owned large amounts of horses and men and money, and this is essential for, once they've blown up Parliament, they then need to take control of it. So this is the next bit of the plot. So they've got the basics of the plot, so we can do this. We've got it, it's all set, we're ready to go for November the 5th, boom. Then we need you guys to help take over, basically.
It seems that they were sort of, once they realised, and as you said, that this is on, we can do this, then they went out to start to recruit the bigger hitters, the people who did have the financial means and the status to actually take over the country after the deed was done.
Mm-hmm. And so they're now pulling in, they're now extending out a little bit, but right on top of this. Now, Tresham is related to Catesby. He's, related through marriage. And and he was brother-in-law to two Catholic peers, the Lord Stoughton and Mounteagle.
Right.
Mounteagle? Mount Eagle?
Monteagle, yeah.
And these are Catholic peers. So it's in their vested interest that this goes ahead because it's going to be good for the Catholics, right?
Yes,
yeah.
So you don't know that. And even though they are sort of quite well positioned, yeah, they are, it would benefit them if it comes off.
The problem with peers is they tend to be in the House of Lords.
Yes.
So you've got family ties here.
Yeah.
And you've got people that's family that could end up being blown up in the boom.
Yeah.
Right, so this is we're now starting to get, like you're torn loyalties, aren't you? Because you go, I want this plot to go ahead, but I don't want my family to be blown up while I'm in it. You know what I mean? So you're starting to get, other threads of worry coming through on this. Now we're only a couple of weeks to go. Everything's ready to go. Everything's set. We've got the right players in the right places in the right time. We've got the funds. We've got the men. We've got we've got everything ready to go. Guy Fawkes is the guy who's going to do the boom bit.
Yep. He's going to light the fuse and set off to the continent.
He's the one with the matches.
He's the one with the matches, yeah. At the same time as the explosion, Digby would lead a rising in the Midlands, kidnap King James's daughter, the Princess Elizabeth, and then install her as a puppet queen. So they're going to put her as the queen because obviously the king's dead. So they're going to, we're going to kidnap her and make her do what we tell her to on the throne.
Yep.
And then in Europe, Guy Fawkes is going to be talking to the continental governments to help their acceptance and their support.
Yeah.
See, my worry about the whole Princess Elizabeth being puppet queen is where they're going to put their hands.
Ooh. Ooh.
It's like, is it going to be one of those puppets with the strings, marionettes, or is it going to be like a whole ventriloquist dummy? And
oh, Paul, you do make me laugh. Oh, God, your brain goes off in angles. Really weird. Basically. I don't know where to go with that. Yeah, anyway, moving swiftly on. My imagination just goes off in a tangent when he says things like this, and then mental images come in, and I'm like, what? Where am I going with this?
Just getting to the exciting bit.
I know. Now we get to the exciting bit. 26th
find out where the hands are going.
We find out where the hands are going. Now, on the 26th of October, an anonymous letter was actually delivered to Lord Monteagle. Now, don't forget, this is the brother-in-law of one of the plotters.
Yes.
Right? Basically saying, don't go. Don't go to Parliament. Avoid the opening.
So they obviously didn't tell him what they were planning to do when they were garnering his support. But he's received a letter.
An anonymous letter at that.
Yeah. Ooh.
In his brother-in-law's handwriting.
He thought it had come from Lord Tresham. Yeah. And then took it to Salisbury.
Yeah, and that's a person you wouldn't want to have it, would it?
So anyway, they decided to basically, and this is where the sting comes in. So they know now something's afoot. Something nefarious is afoot, my friends. But they're going to let it play out and basically strike at the last minute. Maximum impact. Let them think they're getting away with it, and then it's all okay, and they're...
And this is something Salisbury was very good at. He was very good at taking it to the last minute. This is why he carried favour with Elizabeth for so long and stuff. He almost had a magical sort of like effect on court because the things he found out were always sort of done so quite theatrically and at the last minute. Which, with this plot, it took balls for him to do it. Yeah, because if he'd have got his timing wrong, it would have been a different story.
Exactly. But Thomas Wald, one of Monteagle's servants, then warned the plotters that this letter had been sent. So he went, guys, Monteagle's received this letter. So they know. But they thought, well, nothing's happened. No one's come down on us. We've not been arrested or, there's no, signs that anything's amiss. So they returned to London. And on the 4th of November, Percy visited his patron Northumberland to snuff out sniff out even, not snuff out, sniff out any potential danger. So they are sort of like asking tentatively, obviously they're not going, do you know about our plot to blow up Parliament? It's not it's all very subtly done.
You invited
charge,
you know.
You got
yeah, they are
sort of... to see if there is any problem, you know, if there is any danger that their plot's been, you know, foiled and there's a problem with it. So doesn't get anything. And this is Salisbury, this is just perfectly done, quite frankly, because none of the conspirators are worried that something's amiss at all.
They're all quite confident that it's all going to go to plan.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're ready to go on with the plan at this point. This is on the 4th of November. This is the day before. It's all very tense, isn't it, everybody? It's exciting.
Everyone's on the edge of their seat. Are they going to do it?
Even now, because it's the 4th, isn't it? And Catsby, Wright and Bates have even set off for the Midlands now, haven't they? So,
they're off doing what they need to do.
They're setting up they're taking up their positions on stage, aren't they?
Yeah, everybody's getting into their positioning. So you've got like Catsby, Wright and Bates going off to the Midlands, ready to do the princess kidnapping and the uprising up in the Midlands, and then you've got the people in London ready to do that. Everything is on go mode.
Yeah, you've got Guy Fawkes about to go and buy a lighter.
Yeah, you've got him in the tobacconist. Who's got any matches?
Yeah. He's bought his matches down the local market.
Buy for £1.
Then Salisbury ordered Westminster to be searched.
Yeah.
Dun, dun,
dun, dun. I know. So exciting. And then the first search spotted, strangely, a suspiciously large amount of firewood in a certain cellar.
Ooh,
so we've got firewood.
You've got firewood, yeah. What's all that doing down there?
And then they carried on searching, and the second at around midnight, they found Guy Fawkes.
Oh.
He was arrested. He gave his alias, John Johnson, right? But Percy's name had already been linked with the cellar and the house, because he's the one who'd rented it, right?
Yep.
And obviously, so they went, right, okay, well, Guy Fawkes, you're here with 36 barrels of, like, gunpowder. We found a load of firewood as well. What's going on, Mr. Johnson? Because obviously they said his name was John Johnson. And how do you know Percy? And he said, it was just some strange person I met in the pub. And they then put a warrant for his arrest, out on Percy. So the plot is being foiled at midnight, right at the last knockings.
That's a shame.
And that's why it's the 5th of November, because it happened at midnight.
It happened midnight on the 4th, didn't it? So, yeah, and carried over into the 5th.
Yeah. So, of course, now that's blown, everybody's running around, basically. You've got plotters escaping from London to the Midlands. Now, this is quite a feat. I was actually surprised at this. Rookwood, he covered 30 miles in 2 hours on one horse. Not loads of horses. He didn't change horses. He had one horse. And he did 30 miles in 2 hours.
That is going some.
That
poor horse.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about this earlier, and we said we reckon that he killed his horse to do that. He must have done. But he did catch up with the co-conspirators and warn them. So now everyone's been warned. But it's done. The plot's foiled. You're all running for your lives now because, it's only a matter of time now. We're on TikTok time. Now, Catsby, Rookwood, the Wright brothers, Percy, Bates rode to Warwickshire. Now, at the time, this was Thanksgiving, for the discovery of the plot, and they were all lighting bonfires. They were going, yeah, we foiled the plot to blow up Parliament, woohoo! Yeah. And that was happening on the 5th of November. Everyone was going, thank the Lord that didn't happen. And they're celebrating the fact that they had... it had been discovered and Parliament had been saved and our king was safe and all this. So they're in the throes of, joviality about this all, celebration that they foiled the plot. John Johnson's in the Tower of London being interrogated, and all these other people are riding for their lives to Warwickshire.
Well, yeah. Up to close to where Paul is now.
I know, Paul.
And have they stopped by yet, Paul?
No, they haven't. I've got some.
Be careful. Don't answer the door to them. Or you'll be in trouble.
I've got some warm drinks for them in barrels. So they can stop here and go back later to try it again.
Now, poor old Guy Fawkes, John Johnson, remember, same person, is being interrogated. Now, he doesn't squeal, basically. He's not a grass, is our John Johnson.
Of course he's not. He's English.
And on the 6th of November, James I then gave permission to use torture.
That's right, because a lot of people think torture was rather mean. It was, torture was not widely used in England. It had to be sanctioned from very high. Either the Home Secretary, perhaps Salisbury, or the King himself would have to sanction torture if they needed to get information, and this would have been one of the times the King would have thought, yes, I will sanction the use of torture to find out who's behind this.
Because at the moment, the only other person linked to this is Percy.
Yeah.
That's all the authorities know. We know Percy, we kind of, you can make a jump of assumption to some of the other conspirators, but generally, the only one we know for definite is Percy because of him renting the houses and the cellar. And we've got this John Johnson, Guy Fawkes in thing, but we need him to squeal on them, basically.
So do we know what sort of torture they used, or did they just tickle his feet?
We'll go into that in a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get to the gruesome.
He's jumping the gun a bit, yeah.
He's jumping the gun. Let's just get the plot bit out of the way, and then we'll get into the real juicy bits. Juicy bits. Oh, that's terrible, isn't it? Yeah. Now, the plotters raided Warwick Castle, so they've decided, sod it, we're going to just go for Warwick Castle instead, because they're now wanted men. They've got stolen horses.
Consolation prize.
They're literally all over the show. They ain't got a clue what they're doing now. So they ride to Holbeck House in Staffordshire because they thought that would be more easily defended. But all their stash of guns and gunpowder and all that was, I think this is so macabre but funny, was wet. It got soaked. So they laid it in front of the fire to dry.
Yeah.
Really? Really? Where's your common sense, people?
Well, gunpowder back then was a lot different from what it is now. It was very coarse. It came in little grains, probably wheat size, sort of like, and little grains. And it was a constant problem of gunpowder getting wet back then. And to dry it out, you would sort of lay it out in, sort of put it on a mat or something, or a blanket, and sort of just spread it out just to try and dry it out. And plus, these were desperate men.
Well, yes, they are desperate men.
They're being stupid.
Well, I do think common sense, but there was an explosion. It blinded John Grant. So basically, they know a confrontation's coming. They've already wiped out one of their men through stupidity, quite frankly. I don't know. Anyway, 200 men was led by Sir Richard Walsh, who was the High Sheriff of Worcestershire. They arrived at Holbeck House on the morning of the 8th of November. The battle was short, 200 men firing on a house. Yeah. Come on now.
Of course it was short. You had the 200 men about to shoot at them, and they were drying out their gunpowder on the fire.
You can imagine the franticness.
He didn't even need 200 men. He could have just had two.
Yeah,
Turn up with 2 men, knock on the door, and bang.
Yeah, could have done. Could have been a bit more subtle about it, I suppose. But no, they decided to go all guns blazing. And the Catesbys, the Wrights, and Percy died from their wounds. And Thomas Wintour, Rookwood, and Grant were captured. But 5 others remained at large. Not for long, though. By December, only Robert Wintour was still free. So he's literally last man standing, poor love.
Well, yeah.
Only because he weren't drying out his gunpowder.
He managed to get away from all that. Can you imagine this? God bless him.
Could you imagine the anxiety and stress he's going through?
I mean, we think it's stressful now, but go on, you don't want to be Robert Wintour in these days.
No.
No.
That's a sweating time, isn't it? And then, anyway, under interrogation, Bates admitted confessing the details of the plot to the priest, Father Desmond. So now we've got Jesuits implicated in the powder treason. So the government set off to find him, and then they start ransacking Catholic houses. The shockwaves and the ripples of this plot is just... I don't think people understand how...
The thing with the Jesuits, they were always sort of like considered behind all sorts of plots. I mean, the Jesuits were sort of like considered the fanatical sort of wing of the Catholic sort of church, you know. So if you could imply the Jesuits, you were laughing. It gave the crown free rein to do anything, and that's when they really sort of went out and, as you said, Kerry, they were ransacking any Catholic home or anywhere.
And this is the last thing Catholics actually wanted.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can't underestimate the shockwaves that this put through the community, you know, like the culture and the society at that time. It really was from a tiny plot with 10 guys to blow up the Houses of Parliament, the shockwaves of this and the impact it had was just incredible, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. Mm.
So,
It was.
To further capitalise on this going on, the King's Book, which contained James's own account of what happened, and the Confessions of Fawkes and Wintour, appeared in late November. So basically, this is propaganda against Catholicism in general, basically. So it's basically a damning...
It was very common at the time, and this is the start of mass printing and when it became available, and after major events and things like that, sort of the notable people involved would publish their accounts, and obviously the King James did publish his account of the day, which would have been snapped up.
Isn't this the same King James that rewrote the Bible or reissued the Bible?
Yes,
because we get the King James's Bible, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was a busy author then.
And he wrote Demonology as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, so I'm surprised he didn't notice anything going on. You know.
The problem with James, he was very academic in regards to, you know, he would put work out there, and like you say, you know, the King's Book and stuff like this. And a lot of his work, for a very ineffectual man, he was very influential on how people reacted. I mean, we know what happened off the back of his book Demonology. That witch trial started.
Well,
you know what I mean? They used that as a book, basically, of, you know, how to spot a witch, you know, and use that as their, like, sort of yardstick in regards to the witch trials. That's a completely different topic, but he's... It
sounds like he's a bit of a troublemaker.
Yeah, he tried really hard not to be.
He was sort of like a man of his time, a sort of like a Renaissance man. I think, you know, if he wasn't king, he would definitely have been sort of like an academic or someone of high regard. He sort of had the burden of king on top of that as well.
Unfortunately, did, and because he's got that title of king, his words had weight.
Oh yeah,
and that's why we have such repercussions from what he put out there, basically.
That's why the King James's Bible is so heavy.
He had the weight of the world on his shoulders when he wrote it. Now, Francis Tresham died of illness in the Tower. Robert Wintour.
Lucky one.
Pardon?
Probably the lucky one.
Yeah, because it was in December, so it didn't last long. Basically, Robert Wintour was captured in the new year, and in 1606, on the 27th of January, the trials began. Now, basically, Salisbury has sort of layered this. He's in control of this trial, shall we say, and basically puts the principal responsibility on the Jesuits. And then, basically, they all got found guilty. The long and the short of it.
I don't think it was a very long trial.
Traitors. You're all traitors. And the traditional punishment for traitors is what? We've covered this.
Go on, Paul.
Tickling feet.
Yeah.
If only it was that simple. Although I have to say, that can be horrible.
What about being forced to dry out the king's gunpowder?
Risky, but still not macabre enough.
Mate, how about hung, drawn, and quartered?
Yay!
That sounds about right. That sounds
like
the
that
standard.
Yeah.
Hung, drawn and quartered. Only Digby pleaded guilty, and the trial that followed that of the other 7, basically, they were all found guilty of high treason, and they were executed on the 30th of January, and then Wintour, Rookwood, Keys and Fawkes were the next day.
Yep.
On that note, we've actually come to the end of the first half.
Ooh.
Oh,
That was quick.
it was, wasn't it?
So we're going to take a quick break, and then
Yeah,
we're going to continue with this little foray into English history.
During the break, I'm just going to dry out some gunpowder, and I'll be right back.
And if you're wondering how this pertains to the paranormal, you're going to have to tune in after the break.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK Radio Network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Now, before the break, we delved into the history and set the scene and told you all about the plot and the conspirators and all that sort of stuff. And so now we're going to get into a little bit more detail in regards to torture.
Yeah, this is the bit everyone's been waiting for.
Yeah, you love a bit of torture, don't you, Kerry?
Oh, shh. Don't tell everybody. That's private information. And from what I hear, Paul, I'm not the only one.
Oh dear. Come on, you two.
Anyway, getting back on topic. Now, Guy Fawkes obviously got tortured in the Tower of London to give up the names of the other co-conspirators that were all involved. But when he was asked about why he had so much gunpowder, because he had 36 barrels, remember, he was found with the 36 barrels, he said, to blow you Scotch beggars back to your native mountains. Defiant answer there. Right? And that was just while he was being talked to, asked questions like you would. And then he wasn't giving any information away. We've already said that James gave permission for Guy Fawkes to be, or John Johnson, to be tortured. And in a letter of the 6th of November, James wrote, "The gentler tortures are to be first used unto him, et sic per gradus ad ima tenditur."
Sure.
And thus by steps extended to greater ones, and so Godspeed your good work. Good work? Torturing somebody? Lovely. So, light torture. What do they class as light torture?
I think that is tickling feet, tickling arms. Obviously, pinning them down and so they can't pull away or anything, because that is quite torturous, isn't it?
I agree. I would talk anything if someone was trying to tickle my feet. I
mean, if someone tied your arms and legs down or attached to the wall or something, and then they just started tickling your feet, yeah.
For me,
you and your foot fetish. Yeah.
Unless you're a foot fetisher,
no, and then if anyone done that to me, by the time if they took me down, they would have to leave the country because I wouldn't get.
Well, a light torture is actually by using manacles. Basically, it's handcuffs and hung from a wall. These aren't fluffy pink handcuffs, by the way. These are iron ones, so they're going to cut into your wrists. Yeah. And you're going to be hung from the wall. So your entire body weight is hanging basically from your wrists on these manacles. You see, isn't there a famous Monty Python one where they're manacled to the wall?
Yes, I believe there is. This at Life of Brian, the guy's manacled to the wall. Yeah.
I can't remember which one though.
But yeah, I mean, it is. You're actually suspended. You're just hung up on the wall by your arms, your wrists, and as you say, Kerry, and these would have been wrought iron manacles they would have cut in, and you would just be left there. That would be, uncomfortable enough.
Yeah, painful and uncomfortable, because don't forget the pressure it's putting on your sockets, your shoulder sockets and things like that. It's just, and it's we're not talking like beautifully finished manacles either. These are rough edge, so they're cutting in, they're causing a lot of pain. Then it becomes more severe, and basically, bit by bit, the torture ups the ante, and then basically you end up on the rack.
Yeah.
Right, what's the rack?
Well, yeah, the rack is like a table. It has sort of like two pulleys at each end, so they secure your feet at one end, and the far end, your arms are put in, again like manacles, and the rope will go round another pulley at the other end, where they would wind it, and which would basically stretch you.
Yeah.
That is basically it. But it was quite a refined thing to actually put someone on the rack. I mean, you had to know what you were doing. There was sort of a very fine edge between, putting the pain and not totally sort of ripping the person apart. So it's quite an art form in itself. But
I think Guy Fawkes before the rack was 5'4". When he come out, he was in the Guinness Book of World Records for the tallest man.
World's tallest man.
Yeah.
Isn't that in one of the Carry On films?
Yeah,
probably.
I'm sure there's a Carry On film where they put one of them on and he comes out really tall. But it's actually far from fun, because when you're on the rack, cartilage, ligaments and bones would snap and pop. So the pressure it's putting on your joints, and don't forget you've already had a lot of pressure on your shoulder joints and stuff like that. You're already in pain from being hung on the wall. Now they're actually ripping you apart basically from the inside out.
Yeah, and they would have been sort of doing other bits and pieces whilst you were sort of lying there prone, pulling, things like pulling your fingernails out perhaps, or toenails. So they would have been exerting other sort of means of torture whilst you were there as well.
Burning you with torches, candle burns, all sorts of weird and wonderful things they did whilst trying to extract the information from you whilst you were on the rack.
But I'll give Fawkes he spent 3 days of it.
Yeah.
It's no mean feat.
No, he did all right, did our Guy Fawkes. He held his tongue, but
maybe he didn't mind, because if he had mean feet, stretching is too far then.
To be fair, the way my back is sometimes I could do with a bit of racking. Stretch me out a bit. But this can lead to dislocations of shoulders, elbows, knees, wrists, ankles. Like I say, it tears cartilages and ligaments, and bones are snapping and popping and fracturing. It's incredibly painful. And as I say, what with all the other things that they're doing to you, like, have you ever had a fingernail ripped off by, just in life?
Well,
I have.
Yeah, it's quite.
Oh my God, really painful.
In my day job as the St John Ambulance stuff, I've seen it, so I know how painful people have been in. So much pain.
Mm.
So yeah, but no, I've never experienced it, luckily, and I hope I never do.
Well, I have, because when you have like false nails put on, they take it
acrylics.
down. Yeah, acrylics. They basically file your nail bed right down and then stick the nail to that bit, right? And then I caught a ball while I had these things on, and the ball ripped the nail off. And oh my God, that was the worst pain I think I've ever felt in my life. It was so painful.
Mm. Lots of nerve endings in the end of your fingers.
Oof,
yeah.
Very, very painful. So when you think of things like that, that's just one finger, and that throbbed like a bugger, that did. And so, when you think about that, just that one thing was bad enough. I would squeal. I'm sorry, everybody. If I was caught and being... there'd be no torturing. I'd just tell them.
Well, you're afraid of just the rack alone. So, yeah, right.
So, yeah, you can do a rack, just even my joints out a little bit. But then I'll tell you everything. You don't have to go further. It's fine. Just like a bit of chiropractic. Oh, dear. Anyway... And then, obviously, they were hung, drawn and quartered after, when they got found guilty of treason. They then were hung, drawn and quartered. Now, this is the cost, basically, of high treason. It's basically criminal disloyalty to the state, which you can't get more criminally disloyal than saying, I'm going to blow up Parliament, right?
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
So hanging, drawing and quartering is basically what it was. Now, it's the ultimate. It's the ultimate in humiliation and torture and death, all in the same go. So, and you're doing this in front of a crowd of people. This is public.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Right? So stage one, you're taken to the place of execution by a horse, but your head is nearest the ground. So basically you're tied by your feet, being dragged by a horse.
Yeah, they usually put you on a sort of rough sledge, and and you're sort of like your feet. Obviously, you're facing the back end of the horse, so it's raised up, so you're at an angle, and you just sort of carted through the streets to your place of execution.
Now, we're not talking. Your head is bouncing off cobblestones, and you're in the muck and the dirt, and God knows what, being dragged to the place of execution. This is not a pleasant little trip on a little sledge on the back.
To be fair, I think if you're on your way to be hung, drawn and quartered, the dirt on the street is going to be the least of your worries.
To be honest with you, once you've gone through the rack and being hung and tortured in that way, you're probably beyond care at that point anyway. So that's the drawing bit. You're then hung. Now, we've talked about hanging before in the gallows show, so you should all those listeners out there should know all about that. But you're not hung until you're dead. You're hung until you're nearly dead. Yeah,
they would just place the noose around your neck, and you won't be pushed off. You'll be drawn up and sort of just left to strangle for a minute or so, and then they will drop you back down on the ground for the next bit, which would involve the cutting off of your genitals, which were put on a fire before your own eyes, and then your bowels and heart would be removed before you were decapitated.
Beautiful. So you're alive. You're alive witnessing all of this. So if it ain't bad enough that you've just been, you've been tortured, you've been dragged through the dirt by your feet, you've then been hung, so you're nearly dead, but you're not quite dead. You're aware, basically.
Oh, yeah, the whole thing.
Cut off your willy and then set that on fire in front of your eyes. That's painful enough. Although I have to say, by that point, you probably don't care that they've burnt it.
Well, you know what I mean? Died of shock by then anyway, but yeah.
And then they go for the bowels. Did you know, actually, that if you slit, just below the navel, if you do a cut, all your bowels fall out. You don't die from that. But you can't pile them back in. You can't hold it together and put them back in. Once they're out, they're out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Things you learn.
Things you learn, right?
Absolutely.
And then
always carry a handbag with you then.
That's probably why girls always have a big handbag, you know.
Keep our bowels in when we've got a cut across our tummies.
Yeah.
God. And then last but not least, the piece de resistance, your heart is removed, and that does kill you. That if you're still alive at that point, you're dead.
That will kill you as soon as they sort of if you're not dead already, and then you move on to stage 3, which is basically they chop you up into 4 bits.
Yeah.
And dispatch with the people like as notorious as the Gunpowder Plotters, all 4 bits will be sent to the 4 corners of the kingdom.
Yes.
And put on display. They would usually soak them in something like tar or pitch, and they would usually be hung on, city gates. I think York had one, a bit of Guy Fawkes, and I think another bit of him was sent down to Exeter. So, they make sure that the 4 corners of the realm are all covered.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget, if you're in a long line of people waiting for the hang, drawing and quartering, you're watching all of this go ahead, and you're waiting for your turn. They're not doing it all in one go. They're doing this like one person after another. So Guy Fawkes at this point, he's waiting and watching his co-conspirators sort of go through this process before him. But he has enough wits about him, even though he's like weak and he's been through hell. He gets to the bit where he's hung, but he jumps. And that actually breaks his neck.
Yeah, so he's dead. Yeah, so, he probably took the wise move there.
To be fair, I think
Coward's way out.
Yeah. Well, coward's way out, Paul.
Well, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime.
You're so hard at times. I can't get over you sometimes. I think that's like it's the easier way out. You're not going to get hung, drawn and quartered, but, you know, you've been through hell up to that point, so I don't blame him. But you can imagine the crowd were like, boo, hiss. You know what I mean? Like,
he's the main man and he's the one we've come to see.
Yeah. He's the guy that we all wanted to take our wrath out on and stuff, and he foiled them. So anyway, they just basically cut his body into quarters and sent him off to the four corners of the kingdom. So, yeah, he foiled them at the last moment.
Damn.
Bless him. But let's have a look, right? Let's get into the paranormal side of it, because that is the history of the Gunpowder Plot and a bit, you know, about what they went through and all the rest of it. And that's why we celebrate Bonfire Night. This is a big thing. We celebrate, you know, we light bonfires, we have Thanksgiving for all, you know, saving Parliament and all that tosh. And, that's why we do what we do. We have fireworks, and we've made an occasion out of it, which still is very popular to this day.
And I don't think many people are going to bother this year.
Well, I think they would want to bother. I just don't think there's a lot of drive-in firework displays that I'm seeing.
Well, yeah, there is, isn't there? But I think after listening to this show, they're going to be like, do you know what? I wish you'd blown them up. I'm not celebrating that anymore.
I think there's quite a few people that probably wish there was another Gunpowder Plot. And not just one side out, but the whole lot of them. Let's start again.
Well, as long as they dry the gunpowder out before.
Just don't do it in front of a fire, everybody. That's just basic common sense.
Get the hairdryer out.
Yeah, use your hairdryer. Blow it all over the house. Right, so let's have a look at some ghosties. Let's have a look at some ghosties that are actually pertaining to the Gunpowder Plot, because we do love a bit of a ghosty. Got to have a spirit. And of everything they've gone through, if we go on the fact that trauma and you know, emotional impact is what keeps you staying and haunting places, and this plot has got all the hallmarks for it, right, guys?
It should have, yeah.
And the first one on the list is actually one that I've discussed in a blog.
Correct. It is the Tower of London, the infamous Tower of London, which is a place that we all want to go and investigate, but no one's allowed to.
I like what the research says here. It's got more ghosts than a Pac-Man convention.
It does have a lot of ghosts, the Tower of London. I would say, if you can guarantee a ghost, the Tower of London's got to be up there, right?
Well, it's got to be. It's got to be. And, and even this incident in history doesn't seem to have gone amiss, does it? No, it doesn't. Guy Fawkes is supposed to be, supposed to do it. Yes. Haunt, should I say. It's supposed to do it. Yeah, it does it at the Tower of London, everybody. Basically, there's a room where he was kept, and there is, when you go into it, it has signatures, and it's got the before and the after signature. So, like, before he was tortured and then the after tortures, you can sort of see the deterioration. That word there. In the tower, and that you can still see that signature. Yeah, it is quite a famous document. Yeah, I will try and get a post up for that when the show's out, and put it on the Facebook page. Mm-hmm. Now, his screams and cries are said to be heard in the room where he was held, and the room is now named after him. It's the Fawkes Tower. Oh, right.
Yeah. That's the one where they were tickling his feet.
Yeah, definitely. And he is one of many. And the reason we've brought up the Tower of London ghosties is mainly because we're talking about Guy Fawkes, and he's supposed to haunt there, so you can hear him screaming. Yeah. I don't blame him. Yeah, well, he's earned his place to haunt there, and he's in quite good company. Was it Anne Boleyn, the Kings? Was it Princes of the Tower? I mean, there's quite a few famous ones there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you ever come to England, anybody who doesn't live in England who listens to this, then definitely go to the Tower of London. It's it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating place.
It was just an amazing place to go.
To go and visit. Yeah, I've been several times in my lifetime, and no doubt will go more because I love it. I love the Tower of London. It's cute.
Yeah.
Cute, and it's got lots of gems there, which is like my favourite bit. I can't get behind
the crown jewels, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know. I do like that bit. I can't deny.
History of
the work that goes. Anyway, I'll go off on tangents if we start talking about that. Let's talk about Baddesley Clinton in Warwickshire. This is the historic walled manor and was a stronghold of the Catholic faith. Packed with priest holes. What's a priest hole?
Oh, that's a hole where priests used to hide in when Oliver come knocking on his door.
Yeah, a lot of sort of houses, old sort of manor houses, they would secrete sort of like little secret rooms and stuff. As Paul said, and as the name suggests, where they could either sort of hide a priest or hide the vestiges of sort of the Catholic faith. You know, all their sort of paraphernalia would be hidden because
didn't some places have like almost like mini churches?
Yeah, and they would have been set up, but once the authorities come and knocking, which wasn't uncommon, especially after the Gunpowder Plot, you would have to hide all your stuff. They were quite ingenious, sort of some of these places. There's a place near me, Ingate Stone Hall, and it's actually got a priest hole underneath the fireplace. The fire hearth, you know, you sort of remove the fire grate, and there's a huge stone. I think you remove the stone, and it's under there. So someone goes in there, you put the stone back, put the fire back, you know, sort of build a fire on top, light it and stuff, and just say, well, it's the fireplace. And there's someone underneath it.
Quite a lot of... it's quite common, actually, because also in the chimney stack as well, they'd put, like, you'd go up into the chimney stack and then there'd be a room off that they would obviously block off, then light a fire, so it just looks like a fire. There's lots and lots of little places like this around in lots of country towns.
Yeah, and the authorities would actually sort of know that a lot of these sort of well-to-do manor houses, especially ones owned by Catholics or Catholic sympathisers, would have these, and they would go to some quite extremes to actually try and find them. You know, some they would ransack the place, or others they would try and find more subtly by measuring the rooms and then sort of measuring the outsides and stuff like that to see if there's any disparity in the space taken up. You know, so they did go to...
Yes, they went to long, you know, methods and lengths to continue practising their faith. Well, in Baddesley, this is actually a place where Thomas Percy, one of the guys, you know, the fifth man to sign up to the plot, right? He was the one that leased the places in London next to Parliament, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that guy. Although he was killed at Holbeck House in Staffordshire, he actually is supposed to be in Baddesley Clinton because apparently you can hear male voices arguing and they would meet there to discuss the plot. And that's what they reckon, right. These arguing male voices that they hear in the garden at Baddesley Clinton is supposed to be. So we don't know, but that's what people have put on it.
Yeah, sort of, it's got an association with the Gunpowder Plot, and hearing voices, and you can see the story building up around that.
Mainly
because arguing.
Mainly at one point, Thomas Percy actually leased Baddesley Clinton. But whether or not it was actually a place where they would discuss the plot, we don't know. But that's what people say.
Right.
But you can hear male voices arguing, and they say it's disputing the fine details of the plot in the gardens.
Oh, right.
So who knows, right?
Yeah.
Who knows, yeah.
It's probably an argument about who's sending the letter.
Yeah.
Just grassed them all up.
Grassed us up. Haddington Court in Worcestershire.
Yep.
Right, the Wintour family this is. Now, Robert Wintour lived at Haddington Court from the end of the 15th century. And if you look on the window, you can see where the Wintour brothers have scratched their names. That's quite a common practice, actually. And it was a common practice.
Well, yeah, there's sort of a few sort of houses and sort of old school. Isn't Shakespeare's old schoolroom in Stratford-upon-Avon supposed to have his moniker somewhere inscribed on a post or something? Which I believe he sort of done.
They like it's almost like graffiti, but for us, it's really interesting looking back in history, isn't it? When you see these things. I mean, for one, it's phenomenal that age glass has lasted.
Yeah.
To houses.
Very old glass.
Yeah. But like when you go to, like we talked about Guy Fawkes in that room, there's loads and loads of, people have carved their names and stuff into the walls and stuff. So it takes some time.
Well, they had a lot of time to do it. And plus back then, it was possibly the only way you could be sure of putting your name to posterity, isn't it? History, because it would stay there for a long time. Because if you did wind up in, say, somewhere like the Tower of London, it was pretty certain what your fate was possibly going to be.
Well, this was when they were younger, so this is like when they were boys. But when they were on the run, they actually returned to Huddington, and they rested a short while, took mass, then rode off, and that's when they got captured. Now, the ghost at Huddington is actually said to be Robert's widow, Gertrude.
Good old Gertrude.
Okay. Good old Gertie. And now she's supposed to walk the garden known as Lady Wintour's Walk, but the ghost has no head.
Oh, a headless one.
A headless ghost.
You've got to have a headless ghost.
She hung or hung on a quarter din or something? Or?
No. She died. She just died in despair, basically, because both her brother and her husband were executed.
Yeah, so she's sort of like, that's the case, the classic sort of, not crisis and apparition, but apparition that's sort of just waiting for a lost love to come back.
Yeah.
So the fact that she hasn't got a head, she's doing it in sympathy of...
yeah.
Sympathetic headless.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Oh my lord. Holbeck House, oh dear, was the site of the Gunpowder Plot's last bloody stand, where they had a big shootout. Do you remember 200 people went and they dried their gunpowder in front of the fire?
Yeah,
that's this house. It was, at the time, it was a brand new house owned by Stephen Littleton, or it's different spellings on that one, but he's Stephen Littleton. And he was actually a prominent member of the Midlands Catholic community. His brother Humphrey, the names, honestly, you can understand why some of these names have fallen out of favour, was also involved in the scheme. But they don't think they were like overly involved. They sort of knew, but were part of the uprising more than the actual big plot. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's to do with finance and resources more than the actual blowing up bit. Now, apparently the local ghost can be traced to the public executions of both Stephen and Humphrey. So, yeah.
All right.
Ooh.
I know.
What do we go? How do we go on from there? I mean, wow.
I don't know. It's now a care home, Holbeck House. But apparently, but apparently you can see bullet marks in the wall.
Yes, you can still see the shot marks where the sort of siege, the brief siege, took place. They basically just surrounded the house, shot it up a bit. And I think Catsby and that actually sort of knew the situation was hopeless and just ran out of the front door, sort of with their swords drawn, and were shot down.
Where they were, I don't know.
So most of the residents probably know all about it because they were there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, because it's a care home, very cynical.
Apparently,
anyway.
Well, one of the grooms was like a bit like, I'm out of here, right? Got nothing to do with this. I'm out of here, right? I'm not going to stick around for this. He fled on a horse, right? So he had nothing to do with it. He was just a groom, right? But because there was 200 people, they're after blood. They don't care. So he was actually pursued and shot down. And his headless ghost, lots of headless ghosts here, everybody, is all I'm going to say, is said to ride the nearby fields.
Poor bloke, yeah, he was probably just left at the house, sort of like the master was away, and then you have these guys turn up, drying out the gunpowder and everything, and causing one. I bet that ruined his weekend. He thought, great, I've got the house to myself.
Yeah, then they all arrived. He's like, damn it, go away, I had a hot date set up.
Yeah, I was going to invite her and say that this was my cat.
The problem with this, though, is this brings into class, doesn't it? So you've got the masters, and then you've got the servants. I mean, he's got nothing to do with it. He's literally wrong place, wrong time, wrong people. Do you know what I mean? All he cared about was earning money, looking after horses for his family, and he gets embroiled in this plot. Do you know what I mean? By proxy, because he's got nothing to do with it, and he loses his life through that.
Especially a groom, because grooms were usually sort of young boys, sort of. So he wouldn't have been that old. Mm. Yeah, it's not a sort of high-ranking job per se. It's just sort of like you're looking after the horses, basically.
Yeah. So that poor lad, that poor lad, lost his life because of that, and now rides the byways and byways of life on his headlessness, on his horse, without his head. Mm-hmm. Why is there... Right, answer me this then. This is concept for you. Why are there so many headless ghosts?
I can remember listening to... There is sort of like a folklore sort of theory behind it. It is supposed to signify something. Not so much that their heads have been chopped off, but there is some sort of significance behind the fact that they are headless. But I can't think off the top of my head why. I believe it was in one of a very early podcast you done, Kerry, with Mark Norman, that he brought this up, and but I can't remember.
No, I don't know.
There is a significance behind it.
I mean, other than having their head cut off as punishment, I don't understand why, for example, that lady we discussed earlier walked around without a head when it was her husband that had it cut off.
Gertie.
Yeah. I don't know.
And now we've got this poor groom who's a headless.
Maybe they were offered it's either your leg or your head, and they didn't want to be legless.
Perhaps it's their association with the main characters of the plot that they all ended up headless, effectively, after being hung, drawn and quartered, that the story is transposed onto any sort of prospective ghost of any close relative or anyone involved around the peripheries of the plot. Just an idea.
I'll have to go back, actually, and have a listen to that and find out.
Yeah.
I will have to go back and have a little research into that, because I don't know the answer to that. I can't remember. Yeah. I can't remember discussing it even. So I will have to go back and do a bit of research on why there are so many headless ghosts. The theory behind that.
Yeah.
Maybe so you can just say that it's so-and-so and it's not really.
Well, exactly. Who knows?
But these are stories, aren't they? I mean, I very much doubt that these sort of ghost stories are sort of they're heavily fictionalised. Whether there's any sort of truth in them or not. But the stories we're reciting here of the ghostly, they're classic sort of ghost stories, aren't they?
These are just like. But these are the traditional encounters, aren't they? These aren't teams going out in search of ghosts.
No, that's
these
right.
Are like, there's supposed to be a headless ghost that, runs down this lane at, I don't know, at midnight or something. And so somebody's had an encounter. Mm-hmm. And, but that's the only details you get. You're not going to get much more than that.
No, these types of stories are our sort of modern equivalent of sort of like folk tales, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're part of our rich sort of tapestry we have here in the UK, which we're quite fortunate to have. These sort of quite rich ghost stories with their slight oddities, the headless ghost and stuff like that, which again I think may be quite unique to the UK. I'm not too sure on that, but I think that is like. We've done the show on the Screaming Skulls, which is very unique to the UK. I think the Headless Ghost as well is quite synonymous to us here.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, because you've got Sleepy Hollow. That's American.
That's a novel, though.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
No, yeah, it would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's a novel. That's you can actually trace to when that was written and stuff like that. But that's obviously using a lot of your European
magic and stuff going over. I see.
Mm.
But then that's hardly surprising because it's immigrant, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's quite interesting.
Migrant.
That the head, we've done the show on the Screaming Skulls, which is, and that's a head, isn't it? And Headless Ghosts,
Yeah.
You can see some sort of connection there.
Makes it very hard to pinpoint who it is exactly, though.
Well, it is.
Could be anybody. Like you say, it could be anybody.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these stories, if you see, and especially around the stately homes and stuff, if you come across something unusual, you're not going to recognise an individual person per se, especially someone from this period in history, unless you are an academic or something like that, and you sort of do know what they look like. And if not, you say, well, this house was owned by such and such, Anne Boleyn or whatever, so it's the ghost of Anne Boleyn.
Yeah, because she had her head cut off by, there's a history overlaying You overlay the history onto the encounter, then, don't you?
Yeah, that's right.
Because why would a ghost be headless? Well, we have actually got an Anne Boleyn that's had her head chopped off, so it's got to be her. You know what I mean? But with Gertrude, she didn't. Her husband and her brother-in-law did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
and if this sighting is true, then is it Gertie at all? It could be someone else.
It could be something completely different.
Yeah.
Or it may not be anything at all. It's just, I don't know, your eyes not right or something. Anyway, let's talk about the Catsby Estate, which is Ashby St Leger Manor in Northamptonshire. This is the Catsby Estate. Now, they basically ran up an awful lot of debt. They were constantly fined for Catholicism worship. So that drove them to debt. They were very tenacious, weren't they?
Well, very committed to their faith.
And very committed. Now, he held meetings to do with the Gunpowder Plot, obviously, there. And this was the command centre of the plot. So there's lots of ghost stories surrounding Ashby St Leger. Now, you found this account in the Chicago Tribune, didn't you, Richard?
Yes, I believe I did.
Did a ghost drive Mrs. Marshall Field Jr. from Ashby St Leger?
Ooh. Probably not.
Probably not. Well, Mrs. Fields was a young widow and her son, called the richest boy in the world. So these are very well-to-do people. Very, very well-to-do people here.
Right.
Okay? This is 1907. He was at Eton, getting an English education. So she's come to England to basically do her son's education. Because there's none better than Eton, right?
Right, yeah, of course.
As you say.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Tribune answered their questions in an affirmative because ghosts were persistently talking away in the same room, and this room was where the plotters had planned to murder the king.
Right.
They reckoned that you could hear the voice of old Sir Robert Catsby cursing King James for his persecution, his heavy levies of taxes and penalties upon the Catholics. And it is said that the screams of the tortured ones can be heard in the great banqueting hall, and laughs of soldiers who are striving to force them to reveal their hiding place of the Catsby jewels. So we've got a whole little shebang there.
And isn't that a great story? I mean, that is that sort of paragraph in itself. It's got all the elements of your classic ghost story, isn't it? Totally.
I'm a guide. This poor woman, she's got a son being trained at Eton and, being educated at Eton, and she's left in this house and she's got all this going on, and it's all a bit too much, so she had to leave.
Yeah. Terrible life.
Terrible. How inconvenient.
Only just.
So those are some of the hauntings allegedly associated with the Gunpowder Plot. Now, What do we make of it all? What do we make of it all, everybody?
I like it. I mean, as regards the sort of hauntings, I mean, there's sort of, apart from the alleged sort of Guy Fawkes sort of haunting, that sort of seems to be the only sort of place you can place a location he was actually at. And the rest seem to be sort of properties and stuff which were either owned by families or the families of the plotters were once associated with. So for a bit of notoriety, why not sort of play that up when you're sort of trying to sell your manor house or something? You know, it's got a ghost of one of the Gunpowder Plotters.
Mm.
Yeah, I think the hauntings are very circumstantial. You know, as Richard said, you know, you've got a history of the Gunpowder Plotters all being around these various places, and they've got some strange phenomena, whether it's a ghost or a ghost story or whatever, but because they've got that history to it, they link it together.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not necessarily be the case. It might be something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think with all sort of paranormal phenomena, I mean, a lot of people do, you know, it makes a good story if you can try and sort of link it to an individual. But I've seen some sort of stuff, particularly from modern sort of like ghost hunters and stuff. You watch sort of YouTube videos and they get in contact with Richard III, you know, and it's very cool. It's very sort of, yeah, really, you know. Or I saw a picture once of a blur. It was just a blur, but it was the ghost of Elizabeth I.
In a hurry.
Well, it's just because it was taken in a bedroom she stayed in once while she was on royal progress around the country, you know. Sort of, it was an interesting photograph, you know. It was certainly sort of unusual and possibly could have been classed as paranormal, but
well, that's it. Never mind the other 50 billion people that stayed in the same.
I think, you know, but some people put a lot of stock in actually trying to connect it with a certain historic event or individual. I suppose they believe it gives the story more weight.
Yeah.
That's my take on it.
Well, anyway, we do bonfires and we do fireworks at this time of year. Now, watching The Haunting of Bly Manor, a little... No spoilers, I would just like to add, is going to come out here, so you're safe. But one of the scenes is actually around a bonfire. And the gardener tells us where the word bonfire comes from.
Yes, and this surprised me, actually, you know, because it's one of those words, bonfire, you know, you don't really sort of question where it comes from. It's just a bonfire, isn't it?
Mm.
But apparently it's connected to bones, isn't it, Kerry?
Yeah, it's bone and fire. And it originally detonated. I keep getting those two words muddled up, don't I? A large open-air fire on which bones were burnt, sometimes as part of a celebration, going back to Halloween. You know, we've got the same sort of thing going on. And then, so when we get into, like, burning of heretics and stuff like that, obviously, you know, people being burned, that's bones, right? And also the metaphorical way of looking at it is like skeletons in your closet. This is the time that you let go of that. You get rid of it and you do it through the cleansing of the fire kind of ceremony. So you've got this bonfire, and that's where the word comes from. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Oh, I know, right?
I
know. I didn't know that until I watched The Haunting of Bly House, and so I went and looked it up because I was like, nah. But no, that's exactly how it happens.
Mm. And throughout history, well, particularly connected with the Gunpowder Plot and Bonfire Night, it is a sort of like and bonfires were sort of lit back in the day to sort of celebrate something. I mean, and even my father can remember at the end of World War II when the whole village got together and they built a big bonfire and lit it to celebrate VE Day.
But it is a thing, isn't it? When you look, where we've looked at Halloween, we've looked at other occasions, fire is very prominent in that. And it is that drawing together of, celebration and worship, isn't it? It is that form of thing. Now, the other thing, penny for the guy. Did you ever do that when you was kids? It's fallen out of favour over the last few years, isn't it?
I wasn't allowed to because my dad didn't allow begging. He wouldn't even let us do trick-or-treating.
Oh dear. This is where his issues come from.
Bar humbug is all I'm going to say on that one. Now, the burning of effigies, I always thought was to do with Guy Fawkes. You build a figure and you go down the town or wherever and you go, penny for the guy, and you get money to buy your fireworks with. And then on the night, on your big bonfire, you then chuck this effigy, this, paper, not mashed potato, papier mâché.
That's the bait. Yeah, and that's the baked potatoes you're getting.
Getting confused. It's getting late. Now, I always thought it was come from there, the tradition of the guy on the fire.
Same here.
But it's actually earlier than that. It goes back to voodoo religious practices from centuries ago. And then from the mid-13th century, the word guy was used to mean dummy or effigy.
Okay.
Right? And in turn was derived from the Anglo-Norman word geezer or geyser, describing the stooge in medieval comedies. Hence, where we get the word geezer from.
Right. Okay.
And then obviously...
Well, with Guy Fawkes, maybe he was used as a bit of a scapegoat because he was a bit so educationally challenged.
Yeah. So it's just really pure coincidence for Guy Fawkes, and the name is just a pure coincidence. Then.
The name is a pure coincidence, but it then evolved from that practice of effigy into Guy Fawkes because of the Bonfire Plot. Do you know what I mean?
The burning of an effigy is quite a powerful symbol. It's still done today, isn't it? You see political rallies and stuff like that. So I can see it.
Yeah. So, I was surprised that actually comes from an earlier tradition, and that it is pure coincidence that he was named Guy Fawkes.
Yeah. All right.
Do you know what I mean? I was shocked at that. But now we throw Guy, as in Guy Fawkes, onto the fire. But again, that practice is sort of in the last few years. Last 20, 30 years?
Yeah.
We don't tend to do that now, do we?
Yeah, I do have memories of it. I never participated in it myself, but I can remember, there was, usually a guy in the high street, a guy in a wheelbarrow, usually somewhere, a kid standing next to it, and people chucking pennies into the pot.
Yeah.
No, it's more like pound coins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember people doing that. I never did it myself, but I do have vague memories of seeing people doing it, kids doing it. Like a effigy on a wheelbarrow, wasn't it? And then they'd sit there and do that. But that practice has actually fallen out of favour. Don't see that very often now. And basically it was getting money so you could buy fireworks. So you could let fireworks off. And fireworks, again, go back in quite a long time in history. They're not a new thing. No,
the ancient Chinese used them.
That's where it came from originally. But they became very prevalent in the 13th century in the UK, didn't they? Was it Edward something or other?
Edward the Third, I believe. Yeah, he was quite partial to some fireworks, and even a bit later. I mean, Queen Elizabeth I, she even appointed a master of the fireworks or something. Because I think every celebration she had, it was always accompanied by fireworks.
Yeah, I loved a bit.
So they weren't unusual. I mean, they're not a modern thing.
No. No.
And some of the displays they had back then were quite elaborate. The sort of perhaps not on the sort of context of the ones we have now, but they were quite some displays to watch by all accounts.
I mean, don't forget, back in the early days when they first became available, they're the premise of the rich.
Yes, because you're literally sending money up in smoke, aren't you?
To be honest with you, these days, the cost of them, they're quite costly, aren't they? I think that's a waste of money. I love fireworks, though. I
spoiled
do love
sport.
I do love fireworks.
Kids love Bonfire Night when you're around.
No, I always make sure. We always used to do like a bonfire party, you know, like a firework party. We'd get all the family round and everyone would bring some fireworks. And by the end of the night, you've got like I think one year we were still letting them off at midnight one year because we had so many. And then,
so that was you.
Unfortunately, we only do it on the one night though, not every night through November and December, which seems to be what happens these days.
I think it's confused as well with Diwali as well, with the Festival of Light for the Indian community.
Yeah.
So I think isn't it like about a week after Bonfire Night?
Yeah, I think that's coming up, isn't it? The Festival of Light.
Plus New Year's Eve as well. I hear a lot going off now that she never really used to hear a lot of. But I think, because plus here in the UK, you can actually purchase them from the shops. I believe other countries, I know when I lived in Australia, you couldn't purchase them from the shops. You needed to go and acquire a licence to actually go and purchase some from a specific supplier and sort of write out details of where you'll be letting them off and why. And
there might even be a shortage of them this year. Because they had that awful explosion, didn't they, in the firework factory? Where was it? Abroad somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Was that in China?
No, I don't think it was China. I can't remember where it was. A massive explosion. It took half the continent away, didn't it?
Yeah, half the city.
It was awful.
Yeah. That's right. Beginning of the year, wasn't it?
Well, yeah.
Or was it while I was in lockdown? Oh, I can't remember. It's all blurring into one, everybody.
I'm sure it was lockdown.
Blurring into one, I think, this year.
Yeah.
It's just, were we in lockdown or were we not in lockdown? Are we still in lockdown? Are we in lockdown?
It was definitely in lockdown. Because,
just remember, we can go out, but not out.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. And you can't see your friends and family, but you can see them at work.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, this whole time of year is full of celebrations and fire and fireworks and lots of plots and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But King James I of England, as we've talked about in the show, he was very believing in folklore and mythology and demons and witches and all that sort of thing. Off the back of him, we have the book Demonology. He wrote that, and that leads into a whole other side of history that we're not going to go down in this one. But we found a really interesting article, didn't we, about demonic spirits following the 1605 Gunpowder Plot revealed by witch marks in Kent, is the headline. And basically, this is a story. I say a story, it's a true story. And there is a place in Kent, which is in the UK, obviously, which the guy who owned it wanted to create a fantastic room so the king would come and visit him. And to help protect the king, he basically did a post and it had witch marks carved in it to basically repel any bad, nasty spirits and witches so they couldn't touch the king. And this is just fantastic, isn't it? And this followed the hysteria from the Gunpowder Plot, you know?
Well, it's the reason they've made the connection. I mean, we all know sort of witch marks, witch bottles and stuff, they're quite prevalent, sort of building up to this sort of period and beyond it, even up to the sort of 18th and probably early sort of 19th centuries. But this can actually be attributed to the Gunpowder Plot itself, because this only happened a year afterwards, because sort of going into it a bit, if you had the king come and stay, that was a big thing, and you didn't have a choice. The king would say, "Oh, I'm coming to visit you next year whilst I'm down that neck of the woods," and and it did bankrupt a lot of houses because they would have to build new wings and everything. And this is what has happened. He built like basically a bedroom add-on to his estate, specifically for the king to actually stay in. And he's actually made instructions to the carpenters and stuff who actually built this to install these witch marks for protection off the back of what happened the year before. So, this ties in very neatly. I mean, because before, when you sort of find these sort of witch bottles and stuff, and They're usually found by accident, and there's no sort of real dating of when they were done, but these are from a specific date in time.
See, if the Queen wants to come round and visit me, she's got the sofa. You don't have my bed.
No, but when you had the King come round, because it was usually part of the progress, they would, and Elizabeth I used to do this a lot. They travelled the country and they'd stop off at all the wealthy manor houses and along the way. But it wasn't just the King or Queen turned up with a couple of friends. It was the whole court.
Oh, absolutely.
You would have to cater for over 200 people.
I mean, Queen Victoria, that's how Torchwood come about.
What?
Because she was on a jaunt around Scotland.
Yeah.
And, she was attacked by a giant werewolf or something in Doctor Who.
Okay.
Okay,
yeah.
Doctor Who.
And because the Doctor sorted it all out as he does, at the end, she banished the Doctor and set up Torchwood to investigate all these unexplained stuff and keep the Doctor out, basically.
Oh, right.
I thought she got it on with one of the Doctors. Queen Elizabeth I.
Oh, that was Queen. That was Elizabeth I. He married her.
Yeah.
Yeah, David Tennant Doctor. That was.
Yeah, I thought you said that it was Queen Elizabeth and one of her jaunts that then banned the Doctor.
No, that was Queen Victoria.
Oh, Victoria. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. That
yeah.
So I'm getting my queens muddled up.
Yeah. Queen Victoria.
Elizabeth. Yeah, get your doctors muddled up next.
Gosh.
Yeah.
God help me all.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Oh, my Lord. Anyway, I think it's fascinating, these glimpses back into history that we go, because they've only just found it. I say they only just found this, it was 2014, when they were renovating the house. This is in the Upper King's Room at Knoll. And it was originally owned by Thomas Sackville. And I just find it fascinating when you do renovations and you find something, this hidden, but tells a wealth of information, doesn't it?
It does.
Well, yes, they are the marks left by they can pinpoint it, especially, as I said, in this instant, because they've got records of when the room was actually built and they were actually incorporated into the fabric of the room itself.
Yeah. And it shows, like, the belief system in those kind of entities that you need to then put these witch marks up to, or these, protections up to ward off those nasty, pesky little things.
Well, I think he ended up a bit sort of shortchanged, the guy that owned the hall and done all this, because the king actually died before he actually visited.
How inconsiderate of the king. But this happened quite a lot. I would say this, when they go on progression, it would be like they change their plans at the last minute, so you expect them, and then they decided to go somewhere else, and you've done all this work and invested all this money, and, the king or queen never actually, graces you with their presence. I think it's very interesting part of history, this whole, coming through from King Henry VIII all through the kings and the queens following through and then coming into James. That whole period in history is smack full of, you've got the religion that basically is denying all of this, but then underneath that you've got this folklore and belief system in, Queen Elizabeth I, John Dee time, do you know what I mean? All that sort of thing. When you start looking at that, that doesn't sort of fit in with Protestantism, does it? No. But she used it. She's very, very superstitious time, very, that mythology is all there, and it's brilliant when you find something like this, and I just love it. I just think this whole period in history is absolutely fascinating. But we're actually coming to the end of the show, guys. So we hope you've got a greater understanding now of the Gunpowder Plot. For those of you who don't live in England, I think we're all batty at this time of year. You all know that it was a guy called Guy Fawkes who went to blow up the House of Parliament, but it had a lot far-reaching consequences to that action. And King James I is very integral in a lot of things that came off the back of his book Demonology, but I'm sure we will explore that in a future show.
Definitely.
Look forward to that one.
On that note, Say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.
At the Halifax, we know that catching up and checking in on each other has never been more important. So when our customers couldn't come into a Halifax branch, we picked up the phone and gave them a call. In fact, this year we've made over 250,000 wellbeing calls to customers for a natter and a catch-up, just to see if they're doing okay. Halifax, it's a people thing.
We are the University of Bedfordshire, where groundbreakers take risks, where future leaders make their mark, where high flyers soar. Get the support and opportunities to achieve more, become more, defy expectations. Find out how a degree at Bedfordshire can change your life. Book now for our open day on November 21st at beds.ac.uk/defy.